I've eaten my share of Dinty Moore over the years, but a self-made beef stew is so much better. This week I've created a recipe using fresh vegetables to cook a hearty supper at the campsite in Making a Mess with the Yankee Camper beef stew.
This is an outdoor recipe that I've made for years, but I've adapted it for my mess kit. So, to make beef stew out in the field with no refrigeration, the first thing we're going to need obviously is beef. I've selected a 7-ounce package of shredded beef with broth. The broth means that I won't need to include bouillon. I've got a small potato, a small carrot, plus a mixture of dry spices, and that includes a half a teaspoon of minced onion, a quarter of a teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of celery flakes, 1/8 of a teaspoon of oregano, 1/8 of a teaspoon of thyme, a quarter of a teaspoon of salt, and a dash of black pepper. I've combined all of those dry ingredients into a small vial. You can use a small vial or a small Loctite plastic bag. Place those in as well. I think a beef stew ought to have a little bit of thickness. To thicken the gravy, I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of mashed potato flakes. Those I've placed into a small vial, and we can just add those as well. Seal this up, and I'm ready for my dinner out at the campsite. I'll see you out there.
Did you know that if you were to attempt to eat an entire 1,000-pound steer for 3 meals per day, averaging 8 ounces of meat per meal, it would take over 9 months? Included is around 35 fillets, about 25 ribeyes, more than 30 strip steaks, and a whole bunch of hamburgers. That would be the ultimate answer to the question.
Hey, where's the beef? I don't think there's anybody back there.
It could be grilled, roasted, broiled, or fried. But what do you do with the really tough parts, like shank? The answer is slow cook it in liquid, called braising. Add some root vegetables and onion, mix in a bit of spices, and you've got a stew. Humans have been making stews for over 50,000 years. First, by using tortoise shells or waterproof hides and dropping hot stones in to heat the broth. This prompted prehistoric mothers to tell their children, "Finish your stew, there's starving Neanderthals in the world." Around 10,000 years ago, the creation of clay pots allowed the soup to be heated nearer to the fire. With the discovery of metal, such as bronze and iron, the concern of vessels cracking and losing dinner became less of an issue. Over time, the ingredients also changed, depending on availability. Wild game would be changed to domesticated livestock such as sheep, goats, chickens, or cattle. Wild plants were swapped with cultivated crops. And spices were added as their availability became more accessible and less of a luxury. Note that although salt was available, it was used more sparingly the further from a source, such as a salt mine or the sea. Highly prized for preserving meals, salt was an early traded commodity and was so valued that Roman soldiers received as part of their pay either actual salt or a salarium to purchase salt. This is where the word salary comes from. During the Middle Ages, most Europeans ate a soup or stew-like meal called pottage. This was a combination of onions, leeks, and cabbage. Other items were added when available, such as peas, beans, a wild celery, carrots, or turnips. The thin peasant soups might be thickened by adding rye, wheat, barley, oats, or even breadcrumbs. Pottage was consumed by all classes, from the lowest to royalty, although the wealthier folk also added meat and spices such as saffron and black pepper, in addition to the aforementioned salt. The rich could also afford to have their pottage made with fresh ingredients daily, where peasants would cook their stew for days. Since there was no refrigeration, this allowed the food to avoid spoilage and ingredients were added as available, modifying the flavor depending on what went into the pot. As a matter of fact, there's a restaurant in Bangkok, Thailand that has been cooking the same beef soup for more than 50 years, topping up the broth and meat daily. But the cauldron has never been emptied since 1976. The restaurant has earned numerous awards and recognition, including from Michelin, for the deeply flavorful consomme. Talk about a dish that's not fast food. Now you know. We'll start cooking in just a minute. But first, how about a cup of coffee?
I hope you're enjoying this video, and thank you for watching. But I don't get any compensation for this. However, if you'd like, you could buy me a cup of coffee. I'll put the link in the description down below. Thank you. Let's put together our beef stew for dinner. So get out our ingredients. We've got 7 ounces of shredded beef, our potatoes, our seasoning, a potato, and a carrot. I'm going to start by peeling the potato and the carrot. I'll be right back. I've peeled and rinsed the potato and the carrot. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take my large pot. We'll cut up that carrot. And we'll take those carrots and we'll just put them right into the pot. We'll take the potato and we'll cut it into bite-sized pieces as well. Let's start by splitting the potato. And then cut that into smaller pieces. Do the same with the other side. Also cut that into smaller pieces. So I've cut that in half, and then I've cut it into thirds. And now I'm just simply going to slice it into bite-sized pieces. And as you can see, we've got a number of bite-sized pieces of potato. We'll put those in the pot as well. Just like that. I'm going to add enough water to cover the potatoes and the carrots. That's probably about a half a cup. Using my fork, I'm just going to stir all of those dry ingredients right in to the pot. And lastly, I'm going to open my shredded beef and pour that in as well. Let's get some broth on the bottom. You want to try to get that out if you can. Just stir that all in together. So we'll light the stove and we'll set it to medium. Stir that mixture. Put on the cover. We'll bring that up to a boil and then we'll reduce the heat. So that's been going for about 2 minutes and it's started to boil. I'm just going to reduce the heat to a nice simmer. Give it a stir. So that's going to go for about 20 minutes. In the meantime, take a look at this.
Believe it or not, food is a major focus in my life. What to eat, when to eat, how to cook, when to shop. It's not really food insecurity so much as control. There's so many areas I can't control, but my sustenance is one of the things that I can. You don't even want to know what I bring in my carry-on when I fly. But let's just say, if we're both on a plane that goes down and you survive, look for my green backpack. Feeding travelers has always been an interesting proposition. Fred Harvey and Howard Johnson understood this. People gotta eat. When Americans bought automobiles after World War I, Howard Johnson expanded his ice cream business in Quincy, Massachusetts, to become the largest restaurant chain in the 1950s and 60s. Before that, as people expanded westward in the late 1800s, the Harvey restaurants catered to train passengers with lodging and dining. But what about before that? I'm regularly intrigued by how often people traveled before the auto and train. They took boats, horses, carriages, stages, or walked. And there needed to be services that assisted in their mobility. Horses needed tending, people needed a place to sleep, and food that needed to be available. Many inns and taverns attended to these requirements, but the offerings weren't what we expect today. Which brings me to the point of this segment. A meal was often available, but the menu was limited, with the options being take it or leave it. The innkeeper would typically have biscuits, coffee or spirits, and a main dish of stew. This was usually either pork or mutton with carrots, turnips, potatoes, and some herbs grown in a garden, such as thyme, rosemary, or savory. The stew would cook over a fire and might not go empty for days or weeks, with the cook continually adding ingredients in water or ale as the pot level lowered, not unlike the soup in Bangkok. In 1783, as the War for American Independence was coming to a close, Levi Pease, a war veteran who had overseen transportation logistics, opened a stage line between Hartford and Somers, Connecticut, some 25 miles away. It didn't take him long to see an advantage in extending his line to Boston, and found Reuben Sykes, a driver willing to make the 100-mile trip. It took 4 days, and although initially was occasionally empty, within 2 years, Pease had earned enough to purchase an inn across from Boston Common. Shortly after creating his line east from Hartford, Pease expanded westward to the soon-to-be nation's capital of New York City. Thus was born the first long-distance stage line in America. At the 3-year mark, Pease had secured the first government mail contract, and his route from Boston to New York slashed delivery time by a week. Around 1800, he sold his share of the stage business to his partner, Reuben Sykes, and turned his focus to running the inn in Shrewsbury that he'd purchased around 6 years earlier. Not quite done yet, in 1810, Mise petitioned Massachusetts to allow a charter to improve the road from Boston 40 miles west, creating a private enterprise that oversaw the Worcester Turnpike. In 1845, that road was taken over by the state. 110 years later, the state would build Route 90, the Massachusetts Turnpike, following the same basic route for the first 40 miles. Folks move around. Those that don't bring food still need to eat. In the past, these inns, taverns, and stage stops took care of that need. Taverns served stew, as did Fred Harvey and Howard Johnson. And speaking of savory beef stew, let's get back out to the campsite.
So I think that beef stew is pretty well done. I'm going to grab a pot holder. I'll take the pot. Just check one of the carrots here. That's good. I don't know if you can see that that's still kind of a little bit of a soup. I'm going to open my potato flakes and sprinkle those in. And those will work as a thickener to bring it up to something a little more like a stew than just a soup. Stir all those potato flakes in. That smells really good. I'll put that aside for a moment. Grab my plate. See if I can do this towards the camera here. As a side, I'm just going to add some cheese crackers. There you have in the field made beef stew. I'm going to eat my dinner and then I'll clean up my mess. If you've enjoyed this video, take a moment and give it a thumbs up. It just lets YouTube know that I'm putting out content that you're interested in. And if you are interested and not a subscriber already, please consider subscribing to my channel. I put out videos like this every week. If you have any thoughts or comments, leave them in the section below. I try to answer every single one. Until I see you next week, try to get outside. And thank you for watching.